China just took a port from Sri Lanka for 99 years. $1.4 billion in Chinese loans. A port on the southern coast of an island country. A handover signed in December 2017. And the West is finally paying attention. This is the cleanest case study you will ever see of how strategic infrastructure becomes geopolitical leverage. How a port becomes a chip. How sovereignty becomes a price tag. The playbook is called Belt and Road. And there are 30 more deals just like this one being negotiated right now. The story starts in 2005. Mahinda Rajapaksa wins the Sri Lankan presidency. He is from a small fishing town in the south called Hambantota. He has spent his political career promising the South will get its own deep-water port. The numbers do not work. The Asian Development Bank studies the proposal and refuses to lend. The Indian government studies the proposal and refuses to lend. The World Bank studies the proposal and refuses to lend. Hambantota does not have the cargo volume. The geography is wrong. The economics are upside down. Then China shows up. The Export-Import Bank of China offers a 6.3% interest loan, $307 million to start. The Sri Lankan government accepts. Construction begins in 2008. The first phase opens in 2010. The port handles, in its first year, 34 ships. 34. For context, Colombo Port handles roughly 4,000 ships per year. Phase 2 is needed. Phase 2 requires $810 million more. Sri Lanka borrows it from China. Now, the total debt is $1.4 billion at variable rates that rise as global interest rates rise. By 2015, Sri Lanka is paying 80% of its government revenue toward debt service. The IMF refuses to bail them out unless they restructure. Beijing sees an opening. China dispatches a state-owned company called China Merchants Port Holdings to negotiate. The proposal is direct. Sign over the port. 99-year lease. China writes down a substantial portion of the debt. The Sri Lankan Central Bank, the Prime Minister, and the new President, Maithripala Sirisena, all signed the deal in December 2017. The handover happens at the port itself. Chinese flags go up. Sri Lankan customs officials are reassigned. The Hambantota Port Group, 85% owned by China merchants and 15% retained by the Sri Lanka Ports Authority, takes operational control. The deal includes a 600-meter stretch of coastline and the rights to operate the port commercially, indefinitely renewable. Now the geopolitics matter. Look at a map. China just